Well, thank you for inviting me here. It's a privilege and an honor, but I don't usually give speeches. I don't really know what I'm doing here, but I've written probably what's too long for the occasion, and I'll try to leave out the parts I'm sure you already know most of this. I call this throwaway. I grew up on a small dairy farm in western Kentucky during a time when life hadn't changed much since the 19th century. We weren't impoverished, but farm life demanded economy and close attention to every detail. Everything mattered. We knew how to use everything. We saved everything in case it might have some use. We couldn't afford to be wasteful. My grandfather's main piece of advice was always be saving. We could make things. We were independent and resourceful. One of the outbuildings on the farm was called the junk house, where we saved everything that we didn't know what to do with. My mother made all our clothes, and she saved the scraps to make into quilts, not to hang on the wall and call it art, but to cover the bed and keep us warm. My two younger sisters wore hand-me-downs, and I got the new dresses. Food was the center of our lives, and growing it and processing it demanded complex skills. Food scraps were dropped into the step pedal slop bucket for the hogs. This was the purest form of garbage. It wasn't called garbage, it was called slop. We ate ham and bacon from the hogs, and my mother kept a grease can on the stove to save bacon grease for seasoning. Everything was recycled one way or another. The seeds we planted in the spring were saved from last year's garden. We recycled the manure from the cows, spreading it on the pastures to fertilize the fresh grass where the cows could graze, and the hay and corn to feed them in the winter. They ate feed mixture of ground corn sweetened with molasses. I used to sneak a bite of this, and it was something like granola, or maybe I should say granola is a lot like cattle feed. Water was scarce. About once a month we paid the water hauler for a truckload emptied into the cistern, which we drew up in a bucket. We usually ran out of water before we ordered a new load, so sometimes we had no water at all for a while. We knew not to waste a drop of water. We didn't waste water in the bathroom either, because we had no bathroom until I was 8 years old. We had an outhouse. Even after we got a bathroom, we used water sparingly. We had no hot water tank, so we had to heat water in a big pot on the kitchen stove and carry it to the bathtub, or we would take a tea kettle of hot water to the sink. This was so much trouble that there was really no incentive to waste water. In her later years, when she no longer raised hogs and chickens, my grandmother had to buy meat from the store. She didn't know what to do with those foam and plastic containers that the meat came in. She washed them and saved them. Surely they were good for something. She couldn't just throw them away. On the farm, we didn't have garbage pickup because there was no garbage. From the grocery store, we bought few things that used throwaway packaging, tin cans maybe. When we bought bottled drinks, we always returned the empties. My father was a dairyman, and for a time he bottled his own milk and delivered it to customers in town. Of course, the bottles were returnable. My mother raised chickens, free-range chickens, raised without hormones or antibiotics. The chickens could nest, root, and scratch the way they were meant to. Their lives were full and well-rounded up to the point where they suddenly ended, something they didn't see coming and apparently, supposedly, theoretically didn't feel. Now, industrialized farming confines and abuses animals in ways that are surely some of the most shameful things we have ever done as a culture, all in the name of efficiency, that is, profit. The big corporations have taken over the way we grow and consume food in our country. They grow on a huge scale, and what gets lost is the attention to small things, the details that constitute the personal, the humane, the healthful. Soil and water are treated like endless resources, not like delicate systems that need to stay in balance in order for us to survive. Think of the scale, how vast this operation is, this business of feeding the world cheaply and conveniently. Think of what has changed in the last century. World War II in the early 40s was a dividing line. Before the war, farming was relatively simple and traditional. The rural life was difficult, but it was productive, and a family could make a living. After the war, America launched into a runaway prosperity that's only beginning to slow down. Our whole way of life has changed radically, and the goal was efficiency and producing marketable products to make life easier. And one of the main terms of that change is waste. We became a throwaway culture. It seems like a contradiction. For something to be easier and more economical, it has to be wasteful. My grandmother made her bed sheets from flour sacks. Personally, I love the texture of those old sheets. They were pleasing and comfortable. But nowadays, we have to import Egyptian cotton that has a 600 thread count, or else, like the princess with the pea under the stack of mattresses in the old fairy tale, we can't get a wink of sleep. Does this seem absurd to you? Is it a coincidence that there is also an epidemic of insomnia to go with our luxury bedding? You may laugh at our old ways. They're so quaint. We don't live like that anymore. We don't have to fuss over things that are inconvenient or get in our way. We have so many choices. If we don't like that clumsy old cell phone we first had, wait, here's a new improved model with more and more stuff on it. Now, what do you do with the old one? That question doesn't come up. After the Depression in the 30s and the wartime sacrifices of the 40s, America was ready to splurge. We can understand this, maybe to an extent even forgive ourselves. But there has been a price to pay. And we must reflect on how our modern luxuries come at a heavy price. And we may question whether they're always that convenient and cheap. Think of this. The yard sale never existed before we had so much stuff. At some point, we have to get rid of stuff. And where can we put it? Can we blast it into outer space? Tow it out to sea? The ocean's got enough problems. Remember that garbage barge that was adrift a few years ago, roaming the ocean, no place to deliver its load? We have developed a throwaway mentality. In eastern Kentucky, the strip miners who are leveling mountaintops to get at the coal have the same question. What to do with all that dirt and rocks and trees and bushes they have to get rid of in order to expose the coal seams so that the world can have energy to power its luxuries. To the strip miners, it should be, oh, so simple. Just push it off the mountain into the valleys, out of sight, out of mind. And speaking of convenience, they have a convenient name for all that excess, overburden. They dump it below where they can't see how it clogs up the stream beds and threatens the lives of those who live down there. Those people who live down the mountain are ignored by the society at large, by the big corporations that enrich themselves with the black mountaintops. I attended a meeting down in Hindman where local people talked about these problems. We are not throwaway people, one of them said plaintively but insistently. There was heartbreak and sorrow in her voice. You see, even people are being thrown away. Some people are living on the streets. Some people are living in dumpsters. What is knowledge like this worth to us? For example, if you know that child labor is being used to manufacture some plastic bauble you just have to have, do you really have to have it? Or another example, animal abuse. If we know how veal calves are being raised in crates in the dark, chained, unable to move, did you know this? Do we really have to eat veal? Or if you know that chickens are raised in such a small space that they have to be given Benadryl and Prozac for their anxiety, and antibiotics just because, not to mention arsenic to make their flesh pink, does that affect your desire to eat chicken? Where is our voice on vital matters like this? The amount of land and fossil fuel, it occurs to me, that has to be used to grow animal feed for the production of meat is mind-boggling. Here is our challenge. How do we act to change this enormous waste, which can amount to cruelty and inhumanity to ourselves, our neighbors, and the animal kingdom, as well as the health of our planet? Our lives are busy. What can we do? Well, I suggest we focus on a few things close at hand. I don't like to go to those fast food places where you get an armload of trash to be stuffed into a bin after you've picked out all the theoretically edible bits. But I do go to Starbucks once a week, and for breakfast I have oatmeal. It comes in a cardboard bowl, and there's a paper sack containing a packet of sugar, a packet of dried fruit, and a packet of nuts. Even this relatively small amount of trash drives me nuts. Every little packet I must open and throw away, along with the paper sack they come in. So here's what I try to do. I take with me my own thermos for the coffee, and I even take my own spoon for the oatmeal, so that I won't have to use a spoon that's been manufactured in China and sent here to Kentucky just so that I won't have to wash a spoon. I take the paper sack home with me so I can put it in my recycle bin. This is a small thing, such a small act. Maybe only symbolic, but I think it can add up. It can add up to a habit of mind that I think we need to have. Wastefulness carries with it a suggestion of a lack of awareness. If someone's wasteful, he's surely not thinking. Think about what you're doing. Be aware of what you're consuming. Where does it come from? What was the cost in human life? What does it cost you for this convenience? What time did you really save by being able to throw away the packaging? We are slaves to desire and convenience. Taking the time to do something is just too much trouble. Having to stop and think about something is too much trouble. How did we become people who could not take along a shopping bag to a store? Would that be intolerably inconvenient? Can we use forgetfulness as an excuse? Do we really need to order throwaway spoons from China? Our honorees today have done much, much more than just figured out what to do with their plastic spoons. But if we want to stop being a throwaway culture and start saving our natural resources, each of us must figure out how to confront each and every plastic spoon and foam burger box that enters our lives. Growing up on a farm taught me to be observant, to pay attention to every detail in front of me. A bird feather, a funny bug, a patch of moss. This is a habit of mind I've found indispensable for writing fiction, which after all is like piecing quilts from scraps, something I learned from my grandmother. My farm upbringing was a privilege, and I wouldn't throw any of it away. Okay, thank you.